Hey, Earthlings, how you doing? I'm recently out of the shower. It's weird, isn't it? I always get you good ideas in the shower. I don't know whether you do. I do. I was thinking back to the early 1980s. We used to do some street work in Liverpool, and we used to have a stall. We even had an animal rights shop at one point. I thought that might be the first animal rights shop ever in Britain. And one memory I have is a little old woman coming up and putting a quid into the collection box. She must be dead by now. I mean, she was really old in those days. And she goes, "Oh, it's terrible, this, isn't it?" And then you'd see her a few days later, and she'd come up and she'd put another quid in. She'd go, "Oh, this is still happening. It's terrible, isn't it?" And around about the same time, 1982, I got myself elected to the executive committee of the BUAV, British Union for the Abolition of Vivisection, which had recently been radicalised. And I was there along with the director of Sea Shepherd Europe, Dave McCall. I used to go down on the coach and not the train because it was cheaper. And I think my expenses in those days from Liverpool to London and back was something like £12.50. And I was really guilty about taking it, thinking about this woman who used to come up and put the quid into the box. And around about that time, I started thinking about the kind of funding structure, the way that this movement has structured itself in terms of its finances. And for a revolutionary idea as vegan animal rights, we've organised our movement in the most conventional, orthodox, counter-revolutionary way imaginable. All these kind of national groups, wages, duplication, and all the rest of it. And so I thought about that woman again. I was reading Facebook earlier on, and there was somebody who gives $1 to Earthling Ed and wondering whether they should or not. And she was saying, whether I should snatch it back, I think a phrase she used. And because there was all this, these rumours about how rich these guys are, these kind of, these kind of worldwide celebrity vegans that are charging around the world, And I've always wondered about the funding structure of the movement. And in particular, I've wondered about the people who fund the funding structure, the people who give the money, about kind of whether they even think about kind of what they're doing, And so one aspect of this this new thing, I've been thinking about this for a couple of weeks, is the fact that I don't know, I mean, there's a lot of rumours about how much these guys get. And we're talking about, six figures possibly. Some people talk about millions. And so we're talking about Patreon, YouTube and other things, corporate money and all the rest of it. And so there's a lot of money flying around, and a lot of it is ending up, with the kind of three main people we would think of, Earthling Ed, Joey Carbstrong, James Aspey. And so I was thinking about the people, who are giving the dollar, and the real worrying thing from my point of view, and I'm not really an expert on this by any means, so correct me if I'm wrong on this, I was thinking about what is the situation with the tax here. Because if they really are getting that much, they must be in a high tax bracket. And that means that the poor woman who is debating about whether to give Earthling Ed $1 is probably actually giving that dollar straight to vivisectors and to farming interest via the government as tax, because the chances are that if Earthling Ed and the others are getting the amount that they alleged to get, then they must be in a high tax bracket. So that must mean that a lot of people who think that their money is going for the animals are probably actually giving it via these people to the government. And vegans can't ring fence their taxes in the same way as anybody can't do that. And so the chances are some of that money is going to go to farming subsidies, some of it's going to go to vivisectors and everything else. or anybody that the government are bailing out. So, seems to me, because there's a lack of transparency here, seems to me that the people running these Patreon accounts ought to really look at that, really look at their own tax bracket, their own tax situation, and they should be telling their patrons if they're getting too much. If they're saying, look, we need you to kind of switch off for a while because we're getting too much, and that's putting us into too high a tax bracket, and that means that a lot of your donations to us are actually going straight to the government. I mean, obviously they're probably based in different countries. They've probably got different tax regimes organised. Maybe they're rich enough now to be in a tax haven or somewhere like that. I don't know. The kind of real kind of capitalist thing. Possibly that they are. But if they were to tell people you're giving us too much, that would then leave that person with the dollar, just like the woman in the 80s with her quid. That would give them the opportunity to give to somebody else. Like, for example, one of the groups that I work with is called Vigo, and they do something called Vegan Street, or would be as soon as this pandemic is over. And that is a long line of display materials along a bank in right in the middle of Dublin. And we estimate that on their day, the Sunday day, something like 15,000 people pass by, and often, very, very often, we see people taking photographs of the banners and taking, because a lot of them are just like quotes, but others are kind of like points being made in a kind of meme type way. But these things are produced by hand, by somebody who runs an animal sanctuary, a vegan animal sanctuary. And so they, water gets into them and they get kind of destroyed, and it's difficult to maintain. They can't afford, like another thing that we do is we've got these big roll-up banners like this, and these are totally, as it were, waterproof, so it doesn't really matter how much rain goes on to them. They're grand, you just have to empty it out at the end of the day out of the tray at the bottom. But if people weren't putting these YouTube people, these Patreon people, into a high tax bracket and therefore giving money to the government instead of the animals, which they presumably want to do in the first place, they could divert the money to a group like that, and so they could make waterproof versions of all the stuff that gets all that attention on a Sunday in Dublin. And you could just look around the world and just think, what grassroots initiatives are going on? What do they need? Email them, find out what do you need. Well, I'll contribute to that rather than make somebody else rich. But I think these people who have the Patreon accounts, I mean, my group VIP, we have a Patreon account. I think it brings in, I think it's $50 a month. I think it is. But we have some overheads. Nothing wrong with that. To make it clear, I'm not against people getting wages or anything. But I would be against them becoming so rich that they're giving thousands of thousands to a government in taxes, which the government are then going to use for lots of non-vegan things. So if you're a patron to these kind of people, and they won't tell you how much they get and how much they need, and you know anything about the tax regime, something more than I will, just think about it. Are you giving money to the animals via them, or are you giving the money to a vivisector via them? It's something to think about. It's important. The funding structure of this movement has never been particularly sophisticated and worked out. And now we still have this problem. We've still got loads of national groups wasting money on duplication, and duplicated wages, duplicated offices, and duplicated literature, all duplication. There's absolutely millions wasted in this movement, and yet there's a grassroots that needs funding, can be improved, made better if the money was diverted. Think about it. Anyway, I'll go dry my hair, and I'll see you again soon. Take care. in this weird and wonderful time of ours.